my talk today is whether do you need a centralized or a decentralized crowdsourcing within your organization. So I'm going to start off with initially talking a bit about what exactly, a little bit of my background so you understand where I come from, what kind of examples that I quote so that you get the context there. We'll also talk a bit about centralized and decentralized and then summarize and see what is best for your particular situation. And of course, we have a Q&A at the end of it. So what is Walmart Labs? This is a question a lot of people keep asking me. So you probably all know what Walmart is. Or who Walmart is. And like the #1 retailer, Walmart Labs is basically based out of the Silicon Valley. We have offices in San Bruno and Mountain View in Silicon Valley, as well as we have an office in Bangalore, India. And we are the next generation technology creation team for Walmart. So one of the things that you have to understand is initially the boundaries between any sort of commerce, right? Initially there was like brick and mortar, and then there was web enabled, and then some people had some fancy phones, and so they could do a lot of shopping using their phones. But that particular boundaries are becoming more and more porous. So it's all about omni-channel, you don't have a set of people who only go to the shop, a set of people who only do online, a set of people who only use phones, People are continuously using all these different channels and trying to bring everything together, and they are basically looking for a great omni-channel experience. So like, for example, somebody searches an item on the internet, they want the item immediately. They might want to take a printout of that item. They want to go to a Walmart store and show it to an associate there and say, hey, can you get me this item, right? So in this whole thing is totally connected. And what we are trying to do is bring in this best-in-class omni-channel experience. That is fundamentally the objective of my team. And we do have offices in the Silicon Valley and Bangalore trying to build that to that goal. Okay. So let me talk a bit about my crowdsourcing background. I started researching about crowdsourcing about 5-6 years ago. And one of the main reasons I wanted to kind of get into this is because I wanted to create an alternative for outsourcing. So let me explain to you why the need for an alternative for outsourcing. Because one of the important thing is people tend to jump into some new technology just because it's cool. People want to try it out or just adopt it because it's cool. We're not like that. At least we don't want to bring in something unless it is absolutely required, right? So if you really look at it, let me give you a simple case study, right? In any online e-commerce experience, there are hundreds of thousands or probably millions of items or products that are being sold, okay? So we need to present these products to our consumers in the best possible manner, the rich set of attributes, very nice descriptions, everything very detailed, so that, that is the only interface between your consumer and your store. So they want to get all the possible information right there. Now, imagine you have a few attributes, like you can go and buy some of these catalogs from third-party vendors, right? There are certain categories like books, consumer electronics, automotive, and so on, which are very well cataloged. There are so many catalog companies. Now, but all this information is not going to be available from these vendors. Sometimes there are holes in these products. Some of the information is missing. Some of the information is incorrect, and so on. Okay. Now you can have an outsourced team in India, China, Philippines, wherever you want, which is working on this. So if you really look at it, initially you will see, okay, I need 10 offshore associates working on it. Then it will become 20. Then it will become 100. And at some point, it's going to become hundreds of offshore associates. We're not a call center here, like when you have 300, 400, 500 people working for you offshore, then that itself becomes a huge project. And secondly, there's a lot of challenges with that, because first and foremost, you don't want you want these workforce to scale on demand. Like for example, let's say that today we are selling a set of products, and we now want to move from that to another set of products, like open clothing, shoes, and accessories. Okay? All of a sudden, my requirement for UPCs or certain attributes within that particular category explodes, and for the next 1 month, I need 1,000 workers working on it. And then after that, the need comes down and so on. So BPOs are not flexible for these kind of on-demand workforce all the time. Secondly, if you sign up with a company saying that I'm going to hire 1,000 people continuously for the next 2 years, then you're committed to it. Yeah, the responsibility, the onus is on you to ensure that these people have some work to do, because if they don't have anything to do, then you're still paying for them. Okay, so you cannot control costs. And then you don't want any kind of overheads, you know, you don't want to kind of have the HR overheads, contracts, and all those things. Like with crowdsourcing, you just send your work there, get your work done, get it back. You know, there's no HR, there's no computers, there is no infrastructure, there's no other training. All those kind of things can be totally under control. So that was one of the motivating factors. Then the second thing is, most of the tasks that we were doing were subjective or deterministic. Okay? Like subjective in the sense that could be purely subjective. Take search, for example, internet search. Now, you type in a keyword, so when you type in wines, for example, what are the items that are you showing up? Are you just showing wines? Are you showing wine racks, wine bottle openers? What kind of products that are you showing? And again, this varies company to company, because everybody wants to give their own specific experience on the internet. So, so that is very subjective company to company, right? Then there is something partially subjective in the sense that, okay, is this product similar to this product? Okay, so like take 2 digital cameras, one from Sony and one from Canon. Okay, some people might say, yeah, I'm fine with it. You know, if you don't have it, I can live with this. Then there are some purists who will say like, no, I really want this product, or I want these 5 features. If it is present in this product, then I'll take it. So that's partially kind of subjective. And then of course there's purely deterministic in the sense UPCs. You know, like if you say, my friend from AT&T, so he used Walmart as an example, so I'll use AT&T as an example here. Like an AT&T iPhone, okay, an Apple iPhone 32 gig black AT&T unlocked iPhone, right? So if you want to talk about the UPC for that, there's a very specific UPC for that particular product, right? You cannot be, I think the UPC is this, or it could be this, or maybe that. You know, there's no subjectivity there. It's purely deterministic. So we had both type of tasks, and we found that you know, when you break it into micro tasks, the crowd was the best possible route to go for. And then, of course, one of the other things that I really want to kind of call out here is that you know, if you go to Wikipedia, there's a paper like Estel's and Gonzalez, if I remember the names correctly. But check out crowdsourcing. You know, I think they have studied various different definitions of crowdsourcing. I have not read that paper completely. So, and they've come up with this unified definition of crowdsourcing, and or some kind of a definition for crowdsourcing. Our approach towards crowdsourcing is not like, we are not trying to be purists here. We are not trying to say that, hey, this is crowdsourcing. Like, you know, this particular company implements crowdsourcing the way it has been defined in the book, so we will take this, or we will use this particular platform. Our goal is like, okay, any platform, any methodology, any tool, any approach is fine as long as you get the work done. Because at the end of the day, what you have is a piece of work, and you want somebody to get that work done, right? So that's the next thing. So with this, let me talk a little bit about centralized crowdsourcing. You know, like about almost 2.5, 3 years ago, I blogged like, should companies establish a crowdsourcing center of excellence? Okay, so centralized crowdsourcing is basically that. You know, you have a centralized team which is focused on creating all your crowdsourcing jobs or tasks, or whatever you want to call it, right? That particular crowdsourcing experience. So you have a need. You want, like, say, your cataloging team wants a set of UPCs. So you go to this centralized team, and the centralized team, basically, they will kind of take this particular thing and transfer it into a crowdsourcing task, send it to the Turkus or whatever platform that you're using, right? And get the job done for you. That's fundamentally what we call as the centralized crowdsourcing. So there's a central team that is focused on that. Now this is kind of, you can call it a crowdsourcing center of excellence also. Now what are the key benefits when you take this approach, right? A centralized crowdsourcing organization can take care of all the contract management tools. They can also do projects, you know. One of the things that I want to call out as far as the projects are concerned is that in our experience, what we found is that there are so many tasks that you crowdsource, right? Whether you're like a large company. Now, there could be 50, 60, 70 experiments that you do. Now, when you start distilling these experiments and trying to see patterns, I don't know how many of you are familiar with the 1994 book, Design Patterns in Object-Oriented Languages. So you'll realize that most of your crowdsourcing tasks, at least in our experience, fell into very well-defined patterns. There are some 3 or 4 different patterns, right? For example, if you want to evaluate algorithms for quality, right? If you want to build something like search, okay? I searched for this term and I got this as the first item. Is this right or wrong? Okay? So that's a pattern. Or I classified this item as this, and this is what I got. Is this right or wrong? So it's a very standard pattern. And if you have a centralized team, these patterns are well established. And once these patterns are established, it reduces errors. Like for example, let's take this. You want to classify an item as A, B, or C, right? Now, if you give it to the crowd, they are just going to force fit it as A, B, or C, unless you are 100% sure that all your alternatives fall under A, B, or C, right? If your algo is not very good and it's still under development stage, you would probably want to add none of the above or something, because there's a chance that your algo has classified this item as completely, something way off, and so you could be none of the above, or it could be like A and B are too close to call. Like what if A is smartphone and B is mobile phone, or something like that. So, so the centralized team will know these patterns, and they'll be able to explain these patterns to you, and they'll be able to create a task so that most of the work that is coming back from the crowd need not be QA'd. It can be taken, and the quality is very high. Okay. The other thing is that, like several years ago, when we started writing programs, there were no architects, there were no software designers, there were no software developers, QA engineers, and so on. What at least we are seeing is that crowdsourcing task design itself is a very specialized task, because there's this wall that separates between you and the workforce, and that's the only communication that you have between you and the workforce. So you have to design this interface in such an effective manner that there are no questions at all, and there's no room for ambiguity, because that's what is going to ultimately make the difference between a 90% quality and a 99% quality, right? So that's, we believe that this is going to be a specialized skill, right? But at the same time, I want to call out this also in the sense that over a period of time, like, see, about 20 years ago, like 30 years ago probably, when we all go to a stenographer or somebody to type a letter for us, right? Now, if you want to type a letter for us, you just open up Word and type a letter. You can't expect a typist to type a letter for you, right? I do anticipate that in a couple of years, or maybe sooner than that, crowdsourcing is going to be like that. It is going to be a common skill that is going to be important in everyone's workbench. And there are going to be some complicated specialized tasks for which you need the specialist to come in and help you with, right? So I can do basic addition with Excel, but if you want to do VLOOKUP or something like that, I'm a little rusty. So that's, it's kind of somewhere there, right? So then of course, this is going to be also a multidimensional learning, because there are multiple organizations. So you're going to have your, my friend from AT&T said that the CMO has a lot of budget. We, at least, I don't know about, I can't speak for that at Walmart, but yeah, my team is a technology-centric team, and we do a lot of work around machine learning and search and catalogs and categorization and so on. So we also have a lot of interesting projects in the crowdsourcing space. So this is kind of multidimensional learning in the sense that we have SEO teams that is helping us, telling their experience and giving us feedback on what they tried with crowdsourcing. This is a multidimensional view towards crowdsourcing. That's what a centralized crowdsourcing. Now, going to the what are the challenges? One of the challenges is obviously when you have a centralized team, they are going to have a set of processes and they are going to follow the rules, because there are going to be 3, 4, 5. You cannot build a huge team to support a large organization overnight, right? So you're going to start off with 1 or 2 people. They're going to have their processes and policies, and this will effectively mean that there is a little bit of slowdown. If you want a project to be done overnight, you cannot have it overnight. It might take a few days to get it done. So that's one of the drawbacks, at least in the early stages, right? So now decentralized. In a decentralized, what is happening is groups and departments individually determine what is best for them. Like for some people, a top coder model might be the best. For some people, a cloud computing model might be best. For some people, a SANA source might be the best. So you determine what is best for you, and you individually manage your projects, right? And then what are the key benefits here? Like one of the main thing is flexibility, because if you have a centralized team, they are going to stick to a centralized tool. They are not going to go and get 5 different platforms or 5 different vendors. They want to stick with 1 or 2 vendors, platforms. They want to just do those projects in those, until your requirement completely comes out of the left field, cannot be managed by any of these platforms, then they might consider evaluating a third. So here you can choose your own tools, you can create your own methodologies, you can create your own contracts, you can tell the vendor that, hey, we want to try you out for 3 months, 6 months, and if you're working, then we can sign a long-term deal, something. You have complete flexibility if you do decentralized. And then, of course, the speed of execution is definitely there, in the sense that you control the entire project end to end. So obviously you can do the complete thing. And then, of course, the challenges are limited learning, because you have exposure only to that. Like, if you really look at it, there are a few problems in, say, search that are going to be repeated over and over again. So you're going to kind of keep seeing the same repeated knowledge. You're just going to be closeted around that. You're not going to go out of the world, that search world. You're not going to look into the problems that the SEO team is facing or the marketing team is facing, and you're not going to get any learnings from that. Then, of course, reinventing the wheel, in the sense that, as I told you, there are several different patterns, several different projects. Ultimately, they all boil down to a few patterns. Okay? And what will happen is that you will create your own pattern, and you'll realize that some other team also created their own pattern. And all this is expensive in the long run. If you keep creating the same pattern over and over again across the enterprise, you are redoing the same thing over and over again. This is going to be extremely ineffective, and it's not cost effective. And that's the other call out that I want to have here, because many times when people come and talk to me about crowdsourcing, they use the word, is it cheap? Okay, and I kind of always tell people that there's a big difference. Mathematically, cheap and inexpensive tend to mean the same thing. Like you pay less, right? But there's a difference between cheap and inexpensive. So we have to be cognizant about that. You have to pay the workers the right amount of money. You have to give them the right set of tools. You have to give them the right framework for them to be successful. So I just want to kind of make that very, very clear. Please, when you approach crowdsourcing, look at it from that perspective. Don't look at it. Cost effectiveness doesn't mean that we are cheap. Okay. Now, so what are the key takeaways, right? Now, again, if you really look at it, it depends from organization to organization. It depends on what kind of projects, how diverse is your organization. Like my team is extremely sophisticated as far as the crowdsourcing is concerned. We have a very strong crowdsourcing DNA. It's it's not required for me to go and explain crowdsourcing to anybody. We part of Walmart Labs came from a company called Cosmix that Walmart acquired a couple of years ago, and a lot of people at Cosmix have a lot of experience in that particular space. And in addition to that, one of our former chief scientists is a university professor by name Anhai Don. He has a few candidates who are actually doing PhD in the space. So the DNA there is very strong. So whether it is, so in our case it's different. So you have to look at it from your individual perspective, right? And the last thing is, you have to approach it, you have to evaluate the benefits and challenges. If you're doing a centralized model, it's not easy. You have to sell it within your organization. You have to make sure that there is a department created, and there are a lot of formality associated with it. So you have to go through all those formalities before you finally decide. But both these models ultimately work, but you have to decide which one is the best for your particular scenario. Okay.